The incident occurred on a Tuesday morning in downtown Charleston, a city that prided itself on its historic charm and Southern hospitality. David Sterling, a 42-year-old black man, was sitting at a wrought iron table outside a quiet coffee shop on King Street. Reading a worn paperback copy of Meditations, he was dressed in a simple gray Henley shirt and dark jeans, his forearms resting on the table. It was these forearms that drew the attention. They were a canvas of intricate, esoteric tattoos, a stylized raven mid-flight, a compass rose with unfamiliar coordinates etched beneath it, and a series of names written in a flowing, non-Latin script. He was approached by Officer Kincaid of the Charleston Police Department, a man whose crisp uniform seemed stretched tight over a frame rigid with self-importance. The official reason for the stop, as noted later in a report that would be heavily redacted, was a 911 call about a suspicious individual loitering, whose visible tattoos were interpreted by the officer as blatant gang affiliations. The encounter that followed, captured in jarring, high-definition detail on Kincaid's body camera and on at least 3 civilian cell phones, would expose not just a gross, racially charged misjudgment, but a dangerous collision between local law enforcement and the shielded, silent world of national security. It began not with a crime, but with a presumption. It would end not with an arrest, but with a reckoning that would send shockwaves from the local precinct all the way to Langley, Virginia. The video footage begins with the heavy, rhythmic sound of Kincaid's boots on the cobblestone sidewalk, the camera tilting up from the ground to frame David Sterling, who doesn't immediately look up from his book. He seems entirely at peace, a stark contrast to the storm that is about to break over his head. Officer Kincaid stopped directly in front of the table, casting a long shadow that fell across Sterling's book. The timestamp on the bodycam footage read 10:17 and 4 seconds a.m. "Morning," Kincaid said, the word clipped, devoid of any genuine greeting. Sterling looked up slowly, his eyes calm and analytical. He placed a thin bookmark between the pages and closed the book, setting it aside. "Officer," he replied, his voice a low, steady baritone. "Is there a problem?" Kincaid's gaze was already fixed on Sterling's arms, his lip curling slightly in distaste. "Got a call about someone matching your description causing a disturbance. Loitering. Making people uncomfortable." Sterling glanced around the quiet street. An elderly couple was window shopping 50 feet away. A barista was wiping down the counter inside the coffee shop. There was no disturbance. "I'm reading a book and drinking coffee, officer. I believe I'm entitled to do both right here." The response was polite but firm, carrying an undercurrent of weariness, the sound of a man who had been through this script before. Kincaid ignored the logic. "Let's see some ID," he demanded, his hand dropping to rest on the butt of his holstered firearm, a gesture of casual intimidation. Sterling held the officer's gaze for a long moment before reaching slowly into the back pocket of his jeans. He produced a simple leather wallet, extracting his South Carolina driver's license and placing it on the table. Kincaid snatched it up, his eyes scanning the name, David Sterling, and the address, which was in a respectable, affluent part of the city. This fact seemed to annoy him more than reassure him. "David Sterling," Kincaid muttered, as if testing the name for falsehoods. He turned back to his patrol car, presumably to run the license, leaving Sterling sitting under the silent judgment of the growing number of pedestrians who were now slowing their pace, sensing the familiar tension of a public police confrontation. Kincaid returned a few minutes later, slapping the license back down on the table. "Comes back clean." For now, his eyes narrowed, returning to the ink on Sterling's skin. "What's all this about?" he asked, gesturing with his chin towards Sterling's left forearm, where the raven tattoo was most prominent. "Looks like some kind of gang crap to me. You affiliated." The accusation was blunt, designed to provoke. Sterling picked up his license and carefully placed it back in his wallet before answering. "It's a memorial tattoo, officer." His voice remained unervingly calm, a placid lake in the face of Kincaid's aggressive prodding. "And the writing?" Kincaid pressed, pointing to the script on his other arm. "What's that say?" "Some kind of code." Sterling's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Their names." "Of friends." He offered no more, his expression closing off. This deliberate vagueness was like fuel to Kincaid's fire. The officer leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, menacing tone. "Friends from your crew? Look, I know how it works. You guys come into nice areas like this, you scope the place out. You think because you're wearing a nice watch, he said, flicking his eyes to the durable, non-flashy but clearly expensive timepiece on Sterling's wrist, that you can blend in. But I see you. I see exactly what you are. A young woman sitting at a table inside the coffee shop had now taken out her phone, its screen angled perfectly to capture the entire exchange. Kincaid was too focused on his target to notice. He was building a narrative in his head, one where he was the heroic cop stopping a high-level criminal mastermind who was foolishly trying to operate on his turf. The reality was far more dangerous than his simple fiction could ever accommodate. The man he was harassing didn't just operate on a different turf, he operated on a different planet. Sterling took a slow, deliberate sip of his now lukewarm coffee. He set the cup down with a soft click. Officer, you have my identification. It's valid. I have no outstanding warrants. I am not causing a disturbance, and I have not committed any crime. My tattoos are personal, and I am not required to explain them to you. He spoke with the precision of someone who understood the law intimately, not as a challenge, but as a statement of fact. This calm recitation of his rights seemed to enrage Kincaid more than any profanity could have. Oh, a real sea lawyer, are we? Kincaid sneered, his face reddening. You think you're smart? You think you can talk your way out of this? Your presence here is suspicious. That's all I need. He straightened up, his posture shifting from interrogation to enforcement. I'm going to need you to come with me. We're going down to the station to have a longer chat about these friends of yours. Sterling did not move. He simply watched the officer, his dark eyes holding a depth of experience that Kincaid couldn't begin to comprehend. In those eyes was the silent assessment of a man trained to evaluate threats, to de-escalate, and, if necessary, to neutralize them with chilling efficiency. Kincaid mistook this stillness for fear or defiance. Did you hear me? Stand up. Put your hands behind your back. The command echoed slightly in the quiet street. More phones were out now. The barista stood frozen by the window. The silent audience was growing, their cameras creating a digital record of every word, every gesture. Kincaid was performing for them, for his body cam, for the story he would tell his colleagues later about how he took a dangerous gang member off King Street. He was dangerously, catastrophically wrong, and the point of no return was approaching faster than the speed of his own prejudice. I am not going to do that, Officer Kincaid, Sterling said, his voice dropping even lower, yet somehow carrying more weight. He had read the officer's name tag. Using it was a deliberate choice. It was a final, subtle attempt to de-escalate, to bring the man back from the brink of a colossal mistake. Kincaid's face contorted with fury. That's not a request, he snarled, unsnapping the strap on his handcuffs. That's a lawful order. You refuse, and I'll add resisting arrest to the charges. He took a step forward, his intent clear. He was going to put his hands on Sterling. He was going to force compliance. The air crackled with tension. The bystanders held their breath. This was the moment the encounter would pivot from a tense harassment to a physical altercation, a moment from which there would be no easy retreat. Sterling held up one hand, a universal gesture to halt. It was not a plea. It was a command. Officer, I am going to give you one final opportunity to walk back to your vehicle and terminate this contact, he said, the words spaced for maximum impact. You are making a grave professional error. You are operating outside the bounds of your authority, and you are about to interfere in a matter of national security. The phrase hung in the air, so wildly out of place that it sounded like a desperate, ludicrous bluff. Kincaid actually laughed, a short, ugly bark of a sound. National security? Are you kidding me? What are you, a secret agent? CIA? Is that what you're going to tell me next? He shook his head in mock disbelief. Save it for the judge, pal. Stand up. Now he reached forward, his hand aiming for Sterling's shoulder. He never made contact. Sterling moved with a fluid economy of motion that was startling. He didn't stand, but he shifted his weight, and in one smooth action, reached into the inner pocket of his light jacket, which had been draped over the back of his chair. He produced a second wallet, one made of black, hardened ballistic nylon. He flipped it open on the table. The metallic clang of the badge against the iron tabletop was sharp and final. No, Officer Kincaid, Sterling said, his voice now stripped of all warmth, leaving only cold, hard authority. I am not going to tell you that. I am going to show you. Kincaid's eyes, full of smug certainty, dropped to the wallet on the table. His sneer froze, then melted from his face, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion, which quickly morphed into dawning horror. Inside the wallet, behind a reinforced window, was a government identification card. It bore Sterling's photograph, his face impassive and official. But it was the agency seal that made the blood drain from Kincaid's face. The American Eagle, shield, and 16-point compass star. The bold, unmistakable words, Central Intelligence Agency. And below his name, a title that made no sense in this context. On this sunny street corner, Field Commander, Directorate of Operations. It wasn't just an ID. It was a key to a world Kincaid couldn't imagine, a world where men like Sterling didn't answer to men like him. A world where a local cop was nothing more than a temporary and irritating obstacle. Kincaid's body cam perfectly captured the tremor that started in his hand as he stared at the credentials, his mind struggling to process the impossible truth in front of him. The officer staggered back a step, his mouth opening and closing silently like a fish out of water. This is fake," he stammered, the accusation sounding more like a desperate prayer. "You can't. This has to be a joke." Sterling didn't even bother to respond to the accusation. Instead, he calmly retrieved a sleek, hardened satellite phone from the same jacket pocket. With a few deft movements of his thumb, he navigated its menu. "There is a number on the back of that credential, officer," Sterling stated, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "It connects to a verification desk at Langley. I suggest you call it. Or, you can wait for my call to be answered. The choice is yours. But I should inform you that option B will have significantly more severe consequences for your career." Kincaid was paralyzed. His entire worldview, his sense of authority and his place in the hierarchy of power had been shattered in the span of 30 seconds. The gangbanger he was about to cuff held a security clearance that likely dwarfed that of the city's mayor. The tattoos he'd mocked as crew insignia were probably markers of operations in places Kincaid only saw on the news. Before Kincaid could formulate a coherent thought, Sterling's call connected. He didn't say hello. He spoke in a clipped, precise cadence that was clearly code. "This is Raven. I have a situation. Location code 79er Delta. Civilian LEO interference, uncooperative. I need a local liaison team, priority Gamma. Acknowledge." There was a squawk of confirmation from the other end. Sterling disconnected the call and placed the phone on the table next to the credentials. He looked up at Kincaid, his expression unreadable. "They'll be here in 5 minutes," he said. "You and I are going to wait for them. You will not speak to me. You will not move. Is that understood?" The transformation in Kincaid was absolute. The arrogant enforcer was gone, replaced by a pale, sweating man who looked like he was about to be sick. He gave a weak, jerky nod. The power dynamic had not just flipped. It had been inverted with the force of a tectonic shift. Sterling was now the one in command, and the street corner had become his territory. The bystanders watched in stunned silence, their phones still recording, capturing Kincaid's humiliating deflation. They knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, even if they didn't understand the specifics. True to Sterling's word, exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds later, 2 black sedans with tinted windows and federal government plates turned onto the street, moving with a silent, predatory grace. They pulled up to the curb, boxing in Kincaid's patrol car. For men in dark, well-fitted suits emerged. They moved with the same quiet efficiency as Sterling, their eyes scanning the entire area, assessing threats, cataloging witnesses, and completely ignoring the local police officer standing frozen on the sidewalk. One of them, a tall man with gray at his temples, approached the table. He nodded once at Sterling. "Raven," he said, his voice a low murmur. "Situation contained?" Sterling gestured almost lazily toward Kincaid. "The situation is standing right there." Officer Kincaid of the Charleston PD. He was concerned about my tattoos. The agent's eyes flickered to Kincaid for a fraction of a second, a look of profound, weary disappointment on his face. He then spoke into his wrist. "Asset is secure. Package is hostile but neutralized." He turned his attention back to Kincaid, his expression hardening into one of cold, bureaucratic fury. "Officer, stay where you are. A supervisor from your department is en route. You will be turning over your body camera footage to us. It is now considered evidence in a federal investigation into the obstruction of a government agent." Just as the federal agent finished speaking, a CPD squad car came squealing around the corner, lights flashing. A police sergeant, a man with a harried, stressed look on his face, jumped out before the car had even come to a complete stop. He saw the black sedans, the men in suits, and the statue-like form of his subordinate, Kincaid. His face went ashen. "What the hell is going on here, Kincaid?" he yelled, his voice cracking with panic. He had clearly received a phone call that had terrified him. The lead federal agent intercepted him before he could get to the table. "Sergeant, I am Special Agent Harris, Diplomatic Security Service, attached to a joint task force." It was a partial truth, a cover story, but it carried enough weight to stop the sergeant in his tracks. "Your officer has interfered with a protected federal asset during a sensitive operation. We will be handling it from here." Harris gestured to another agent, who approached Kincaid and spoke in a low, firm voice. "Officer, unclip your camera. Hand it to me." Now, Kincaid, trembling, fumbled with the clip on his uniform and handed over the device that contained the record of his career's implosion. The footage from the bystander phones, already being uploaded to social media with captions like "Cop messes with the wrong guy," showed the entire, humiliating exchange. The story was going viral before the police sergeant even fully understood what had happened. The institution, the reluctant system, was being forced to respond in real time. The quiet coffee shop on King Street had become ground zero for an incident that would dominate the news cycle for days, a perfect, damning portrait of prejudice crashing headlong into power. In the aftermath, Officer Kincaid was immediately placed on administrative leave. The Charleston Police Department, under immense pressure from the viral videos and quiet, insistent calls from Washington, D.C., launched an internal affairs investigation that was a mere formality. Within a week, Kincaid was fired for gross misconduct, violations of departmental policy, and actions bringing the department into disrepute. The city issued a formal, if stilted, public apology to Mr. Sterling, who was never officially named in the press release, referred to only as a private citizen. The federal government made no public comment. The incident simply vanished from their official record, absorbed into the silent, classified world where David Sterling lived and worked. For Sterling, the vindication was hollow. A few days later, he sat in a sterile, soundproofed room in a secure facility miles away, undergoing a debriefing with a CIA psychologist. He saw the tattoos, Sterling said, his voice flat, recounting the event. And he saw a black man. The equation in his head was simple. Threat, criminal, gang member. Nothing else mattered. Not the context, not my demeanor, nothing, the psychologist nodded. "And when you revealed who you are?" Sterling leaned back, a deep, bone-weary sigh escaping him. The fear in his eyes. It wasn't fear of me. It was fear of the institution I represent. The power. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he did it to someone who could bring consequences down on him. If I had been anyone else, a teacher, a plumber, an accountant, I'd have been in handcuffs. My face pressed against the pavement. Another statistic, he looked at his forearms, at the ink that represented fallen comrades and missions that had saved lives. All the authority I carry, all the training, all the service. And on that street, for 10 minutes, none of it mattered. I was just another threat to be neutralized. The ID card shouldn't have been necessary. My humanity should have been enough.